I want to talk to you tonight about the soundtrack to your season. And I apologize in advance for any coughing fits I go into or clearing my throat. I'll try not to do it in the microphone. But I was thinking, this is fun. You can stay seated. I'm going to share some scripture in a little bit. But I was thinking about I love music. Are anyone music lovers, like real big music lovers? Okay, some hands shot up really fast. My wife, it's so funny because she leads worship and she does not listen to music. Like she listens to like Coco Melon, and if you're a grandparent, maybe you know what that is, or is like kids music. Like her Spotify algorithm is all kids music and like a slight little bit of worship music when she's trying to find new songs for us to sing here. And I don't understand people that don't listen to music. I was going to say I don't trust people that don't listen to music, but my wife doesn't listen to music, so I don't want to say that. Get me in trouble. She's not here, but turn off the camera, Brother Chris. Feeling loose tonight. But I was thinking about the like generations of music and how throughout all the different decades, you can kind of pinpoint certain soundtracks or certain songs maybe that kind of just made the decade, right? So I'm going to go way back to the 40s. And if you're born in the 40s or earlier, I'm sorry for making it sound way back. But in the 40s, one of the first that came out when I looked up like popular things in the 40s, soundtracks, things like that, was the Gone with the Wind soundtrack. You're familiar? The movie Gone with the Wind, very iconic soundtrack. In the 40s, it kind of defined that decade. When we move on to the 50s, we get soundtracks like the Pink Panther, the original Pink Panther. Humphrey Bogart rushed onto the scene with Singing in the Rain and other movies. When we get into the 60s, and you can shout out something if something comes out to you, just the Beatles. The Sound of Music was like a soundtrack in the 60s, a really big movie that came out. And then we start getting into the good stuff in the 70s. And the 70s had soundtracks like Dun-na, Dun-na, Dun, Jaws, right? Everybody knows, like I'm not even gifted in that way, but I just make that noise. Star Wars, very epic soundtrack. John Williams, I don't even know how you say his last name, but it doesn't have an I. That's always been weird to me. Grease was a big one in the 70s. And then you get to the greatest decade of music in all of history of music. Put your thumb down. The 80s. The 80s had Top Gun, Footloose, Eye of the Tiger, like Rocky. Some of y'all are like scared or nervous to like cheer because, but the 80s, my opinion, best generation of music. It kind of has gone downhill since the 80s. The 90s brought us Titanic, some more like iconic soundtracks, The Lion King, which is good. And then the 2000s, Hans Zimmer kind of came onto the scene. Gladiator, Inception, some of these movies. The Greatest Showman and Kanto came out like recently. That's kind of one that your kids may know. Frozen. They're not, and the kids are not in here, so we can, although it might make Braden upset, but Les Miserables, some of these other musicals that got really big. So you think about all these, you think about like decades, and I just me saying some of this, you might be thinking to yourself, like whatever decade, especially like if you think back to when you were in high school, most everyone here is either in high school or out of high school, and you think back to like those iconic songs or those things that just defined every breakup that you had, every relationship. I see some tears already like coming down. It's just, there's a soundtrack to every season of life, and there's a soundtrack to every decade, just like there's a soundtrack to every decade. There's a soundtrack to seasons that you're in. More than once in recent weeks, I've found myself in conversations about how music, and more specifically those certain songs, can take you back to a point or even a location from years ago. I remember when I had first started running, and I did not run at all, and so you always kind of mark those like different distances that you hit. I can take you to the point where I ran 8 miles for the first time, where the first time I hit 8 miles out in Cibolo, I know the exact street I was on. I could probably take you to in front of the house, and I can tell you exactly what was playing at that time, just because there's certain moments that you kind of draw into. If you want to feel old, a couple weeks ago, some of you are like, I already feel old. It's okay. A couple weeks ago, I was listening to Air One, the radio station here in town, a Christian radio station, and they were talking about the most influential contemporary Christian music songs over the last 25 years. So think of that, 25 years. Maybe some of you might not be able to wrap your mind around 25 years, but 25 years. 25 years, this is quite a while, a quarter of a century. They went down the line, so many songs, and they were kind of debating back and forth what the most influential Christian songs were of the last 25 years. You know what song was not on that list? Not DC Talk. DC Talk is more than 25 years. I would argue that the most iconic Christian song since CDs were being made is I Can Only Imagine. But it was released in 1999. It's more than 25 years old. Isn't that crazy? That makes you feel old if you have been around Christian music for a while. I Can Only Imagine is older than 25 years old. But it's interesting how those feelings of nostalgia can come in and they can set in, and certain soundtracks or certain songs, they can make you feel like you're there again, or make you feel like bring those memories back, that are long ago. I remember before Brother King passed away, there was this moment. I've shared this here before, and Sister Gwen will remember this, and my family, because we were together. But we were at the Carruthers' house, and we were sitting there, and Brother King had already lost a lot of his memory and wasn't really recognizing anyone just because of his condition. And so, he when we first moved here, he knew exactly who I was, and we had a lot of conversations, but he didn't even at this point recognize me. But Nathan had brought out his phone, and he had turned on, I can't even remember. Do you remember what song it was, Sister King? It was some kind of like maybe Jailhouse Rock or something like that. I'm not saying it was that song, but it was like something in that like kind of old, and Brother King like started tapping his foot, and like he was on beat, and he was tapping his foot, and he started singing the words. And it was mind-blowing, because at that point, like, he couldn't even say my name, but he remembered these songs from over the course of his life that somehow had been embedded into, it was just incredible. And so it just goes to show that there are moments like that. There are things like that that you connect with, or songs that you connect with, or pieces of music, or anything that you can connect with that can be part of a season of life and can just be forever entrenched. In 1 Samuel chapter 16, we find a story, one of the best music stories, and I've used this story, excuse me, I've used it several times in different capacities, but there was a story of Saul, the King Saul, and it says in verse 14, the Spirit of the Lord departed from Saul, and a harmful spirit from the Lord tormented him. Saul's servant said to him, behold, now a harmful spirit from God is tormenting you. Let our Lord now command your servants who are before you to seek out a man who's skillful in playing the lyre or the harp. And when a harmful spirit from God is upon you, he will play it and you will be well. So Saul said to his servants, provide for me a man that can play well and bring him to me. One of the young men answered and said, behold, I've seen a son of Jesse the Bethlehemite who's skillful in playing, a man of valor, a man of war, prudent in speech, and a man of good presence, and the Lord is with him. Therefore Saul sent messengers to Jesse and said, send me David your son, who is with the sheep. And Jesse took a donkey laden with bread and a skin of wine and a young goat, and sent them by David to his son Saul. And David came to Saul and entered his service, and Saul loved him greatly, and he became his armor bearer. And Saul sent to Jesse, saying, let David remain in my service, for he has found favor in my sight. And whenever the harmful spirit from God was upon Saul, David took the lyre and played it with his hand. So Saul was refreshed and was well, and the harmful spirit departed from him. I love this story. I love it for a lot of reasons, but I love it because we find this scene where David came. He was busy preparing for whatever God had for him. And that's one of the things I love most about it. It's not exactly what I'm talking about tonight, but David had spent a lot of time in the fields with the sheep. He had been talking, he had been writing songs, he had been writing music, and he was positioned in such a way that when an opportunity came to be in front of the king, he was able to step into that. And if we think about that, this is obviously a soundtrack of Saul's life, right? It's kind of where David's soundtrack and Saul's soundtrack kind of overlapped, because David had been presenting himself in worship. He had been preparing himself. He had been doing all these things. And Saul needed moments of worship. He needed someone that could help lead him. And so this is a moment of music, of worship, of music and stuff that we see here. But soundtracks are not always necessarily music. And that's what I want to leave you with tonight. Soundtracks are not always music per se. We think about it, and it's funny to talk about all the different generations and decades of music and things like that, like we have, but that's not always what we're hearing. I want to tell you 3 things that can be soundtracks to your life or to a season in your life. Number 1, a soundtrack can be the people that you surround yourself with. So if we think about it, we're all here, but when we go out of this place, we have people that we surround ourselves with. We have coworkers. Maybe we have an external hobby that we've connected with people outside of the church with. If you play a sport, or if you're involved in some kind of craft or things like that, maybe you've connected with someone and there's people surrounding you. And we choose, right? We choose who to bring into our lives. We choose to bring people in. We choose to allow people to speak into our lives. Job chapter 16, you know the story. Maybe you know the story of Job when he's been tormented and he's been dealing with all of these different these problems and this chaos in his life. And he had surrounded himself with some friends that started giving him advice. And he says this in verse 2 of Job 16. He says, "I've heard many such things. Miserable comforters are you all." How many of you would like to say that to some people at work? Miserable comforters are every single one of you. They probably look at you funny and wonder why you're speaking King James to them. But the people that you surround yourself with become part of the soundtrack of your life. The people that you allow to speak into your life. And at some point, Job, after hearing all of these things from these people that were friends or that were apparent do-gooders, but started just telling him, well, curse God and die, you'll get out of this situation. He had started hearing all these things, and he just identified the fact that, hey, you're making me more miserable right now than I already am. And he had this, I guess, audacious kind of approach to saying, like, back up, be quiet, sit down, keep your mouth shut, leave me alone, I'll figure this out. So the people you surround yourself with can easily bring negativity into your life, but also can bring positivity into your life. If you're surrounding yourself with people that are encouraging, uplifting, edifying, the words that they share and the life that they speak into you can be very encouraging. And so a soundtrack in your life is the people that you surround yourself with. Another soundtrack in your life is your own internal dialogue. Now, this one's tough. This one's what we don't really want to talk about, because our internal dialogue can be the cause of a lot of turmoil, a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress. If you have something that you're worried about, something in particular that you're worried about, and it dwells on your mind, and you continue to just think about it and dwell on it, and a lot of times we have the unique ability as humans to create the worst possible scenario in our mind, right? Like it's very easy, like, oh, like something hurts, I'm gonna die soon. Or whatever, just we maybe all have hypochondriac tendencies a little bit, or something is, like maybe you hear that your job had a down year and they're not, and then it's like, oh, well, I'm probably going to lose my job. Things like that. Like we have that internal dialogue that can take over and can start to make things worse. Exodus chapter 4, it talks about Moses having internal dialogue, and really, no doubt he was having what we're about to read. He was talking to the Lord, but I'm sure it didn't just come out of nowhere. Moses said to the Lord, in Exodus chapter 4, verse 10, "Oh, my Lord, excuse me, I'm not eloquent, either in the past or since you have spoken to your servant, but I'm slow of speech and of tongue." So the Lord had told Moses at this point, had given Moses the mission to go and help lead the people, lead the children of Israel out of Egypt. And so, he had already got the mission. He had already got the plan. And apparently he had been speaking to God on a regular basis in this. Because he says, either in the past or since you've spoken. I'm not eloquent. I can't speak well. I can't, I really enjoyed Brother Alex's message on Sunday morning and his lesson. And I just walked up to him. I'm like, man, you need to be a professor, because he's just so good with presentation and speech. I'm not that, I like to get you laughing a little bit so you can forget about the bad words, that I say or whatever. So, but Moses is having this conversation with God, and he's, I'm not equipped to do this. And it was internal dialogue that was now being spoken out to the Lord. And the Lord was telling him, well, I've equipped you. You don't need anything else. I've given you the tools that you have. You have your brother. You have, all these different things. But he still had that pressure that he had put on himself about not being able to talk good. Speak well. I don't know. Whatever. And so he had that. And we have our own internal dialogue. We have our own stuff that we deal with internally that can cause us stress, cause us anxiety, but we can also be edifying to ourselves internally. It's the same thing as having people around you. Number 3, the other thing that can be a soundtrack to your season, and these are just a few examples, obviously there are many, but the third one that I want to share is the crowd or the voices that are not in your immediate circumference, but the other crowd. So if you think around here, the people that are around you, the people that you've positioned around you, are the people in this room, right? But then there's a ton of other people out there. And a lot of times we can be affected by the crowd or by the voices. We see this probably more than anywhere in politics and in, politics and religion, but in the public square, in the public discourse about politics and religion. You hear people say certain things or attack certain ideals or ideologies, or you'll see politicians that attack certain other politicians for different reasons. And so we're affected by the crowd as well. And if you don't think that that's true, then you can take a look at Mark chapter 15. When you see the crowd influence a man of power, when that man is Pilate, it says in verse 9, he answered them saying, he being Pilate, answered them. So they're in this setting where they're trying to decide between Barabbas or Jesus. He answered and said, "Do you want me to release for you the king of the Jews?" For he perceived that it was out of envy that the chief priests had delivered him up. So Pilate, in this moment, recognizes that the chief priests, the Pharisees, were jealous, were envious. There was no real fault in Jesus, but they delivered him up to be crucified. So he had already perceived that. But the chief priests stirred up the crowd. The people that were there that were against Jesus stirred up the crowd and said, "Release Barabbas instead." I mean, just imagine put yourself, I don't know if you've ever done that as an exercise, but put yourself in the crowd. When we think about Easter, when we get close to Easter and Palm Sunday, and we think about all these things that led up to the moment of the crucifixion, we're about to be in that. The next couple weeks, we're going to be in that time of the year. I encourage you, as you listen to messages that are preached throughout this time, to kind of put yourself in the crowd in this situation. Because think about it. You're in the crowd, and everything is stirring. Everything's, going around, and you know that Jesus is there. And the crowd starts crying for a murderer to be released instead. And you've seen the life of Jesus go on, and miracles have been done. And yeah, he's said some crazy things like claiming to be the Father. And you think, oh, that's crazy. But I mean, just think about how distorted was their reality that they chose to call for Barabbas instead of Jesus. And it was that crowd voice, because Pilate said again to them in verse 12, "What shall I do with the man you call King of the Jews?" And they cried out, "Crucify him." There had to be blood shed that day. They had put the crosses up. They had got ready. They had done everything that they needed to do. Somebody was going to die that day. And they said, "Crucify him." And Pilate said to them, he asks again, "Why? What evil has he done?" And they shouted all the more, "Crucify him." And the crowd made Pilate, who had in his power the authority to say no or to release him, they made Pilate change his, or maybe not change his mind, but they pushed him over in a sense, because he said he wished to satisfy the crowd, and so he released Barabbas, and he washed his hands, and he said, this blood's on your hands, but he let them do what they wanted to do. The crowd and the people that were around, not only did the Pharisees and the chief priests influence the crowd, but then the crowd influenced the government, which still happens today. And the crowd and the voices around you, and the external voices, not just what's right there immediately around you, but the peripheral can be a soundtrack in your life. And so in this world, I want to ask you tonight, I want you to think about something this week. What kind of soundtrack are you listening to on a daily basis? And I don't necessarily mean your music, although that could be a thing that you want to consider and think about, because I do believe that what goes in reflects what comes out reflects what goes in. And so music has always been something that I've struggled with my whole life. And constantly having to battle listening to edifying, uplifting music, and I do much better now than I've done in the past. But that's just something that happens. And so, what kind of soundtrack are you going to listen to? What are you going to be singing along to? When the voices start giving you negative reinforcement about things in your life, or when the friends start saying, "Well, just curse God and die," and when the peripheral is saying, Christianity is not true, and you don't need to believe all that, and don't need to do all those things, and you don't need to be at a church on a Wednesday night. When all that starts happening, what are you going to sing along with? What are you going to allow to come into your ears and into your mind? What in even moments of sickness or cognitive decline will you sing because it's etched on your heart? That's such a powerful illustration with Brother King, because at the end of the day, when all else is failing, when your body and your mind are failing you, what is going to come out because you've spent so much time putting it in? What's going to bleed out of your life because you've spent so much time putting it in? If we go back to David's story and we think about what he had been doing throughout his life, Saul had the wherewithal to seek out a person who was more than a good player. He says, "Bring me someone that can play well." I always love that. I talk to, when we do like music clinics or things like that with other praise teams, I always like to point that out, that Saul asked for someone that could play well, because that implies, and I've preached this here many years ago, that there were more people that could play. But he specifically asked for someone that could play well. And so someone that was skillful in playing. And so then they bring David, and he was skillful in playing. And how do they describe him? A man of valor, which is courage, a man of war, a man that's prudent in speech, a man that has a good presence, and the most important thing, the Lord is with him. David was after God's heart. David was pursuing God's heart. He was a man after God's own heart. He was pursuing the things of God. He was doing the things of God that God called him to do. And while his songs sometimes had lamenting and he had dark songs, he had his emo songs, like he had some dark songs that were emotional because of turmoil that he had been through. And he definitely wrote some more later, even after he became king. He had a lot of songs that he had to write that were probably pretty dark. But he did all this, and he was striving after God's heart, and he was doing all the things that he needed to do, and he was always praising and worshiping God and pursuing God. And so what is your soundtrack going to be? What is the soundtrack of this season of your life going to be? Think about where you are now. Think about what you're going through now. There's people that are going through tremendous sickness, not knowing what the outcome is going to be. There's people that are pressed up against financial situations. There's people that are pressed up against all these different things. There's all these different circumstances in your life that are pressuring you and weighing you down. But what are you going to continue to listen to? What's going to be the soundtrack to this season of your life? Is it going to be heavy? Is it going to be depressing? Is it going to be the opposite of edifying? Or is it going to be uplifting? Is it going to be worshipful? Is it going to be edification to your soul and your spirit? Would you stand with me? I want to just make that a thought for you throughout this week, because you all know where you are. You know what you're going through. I don't know what you're going through, but you know what you're going through. And I want to ask you in this next moment, just to take a moment and to pray, God, whatever you're speaking to me, or whatever is going to be happening, or whatever I'm going to be going through next, I want the soundtrack that I'm hearing to be your voice, to be your will, to be songs that are uplifting to you, literally and figuratively. And I want to take in what you're speaking to me.